Welcome to the OK Let's Learn podcast. This is two podcasts in one. One where we dive into tons of interesting topics, and another where we dive into tons of interesting books and stories. My name is Kevin O'Keefe. So today, let's learn all about the story of our nutrients that we need for our bodies and how those nutrients translate into a well-balanced diet. We'll do a deep dive on everything, the history, how we came to know what these nutrients were. Hey, we've been eating food since our species has been born, but now we understand more and more today what it is that's important in terms of what we put into our body. If there's one thing my father has preached to me, is the only thing you can control, Kevin, is what you put into your body. So make sure it's smart. Hey, for most of human history, people didn't know why food mattered, only that it did. Sailors in the 1700s would go months at sea, and suddenly they would develop these bleeding gums, and the gums, and they were weak and they were horrible. It was this mysterious illness that eventually they called scurvy. Then came a Scottish doctor named James Lind. In 1747, he ran one of the first scientific nutrition experiments. He gave sailors different foods, and the ones who ate citrus fruits recovered. That was our first clue that something invisible in food mattered. And in this case, we now call that vitamin C. And boy, did we find out that that was essential. In the late 1700s, another scientist, a chemist by the name of Antoine Lavoisier, he began studying how the body uses food for energy. He realized that eating is a bit like burning fuel, and our bodies take in food. Obviously, we take in oxygen, and it is through that process that energy is released. Then fast forward to the early 1900s, and other scientists, one in particular, Elmer McCallum, began identifying vitamins. Yes, the vitamins we know today. They're tiny substances in food that prevent diseases. Piece by piece, little by little, over this time period, this scientific revolution, it uncovered major categories of nutrients that we know today. The big six. Number one, water. Number two, carbohydrates. 3, protein. 4, fats. 5, vitamins. And 6, minerals. These are the 6 essential nutrients. They are the supply chain of our existence. Now we start with water, number one. It's so overlooked, but how can you not discount water when we're made up of 60% water? Our water in our body carries the nutrients. It removes the waste in our body. It regulates our temperature of our body and keeps everything moving and functioning. Obviously, we would not exist without water. We know that. Just go back to my previous episodes in terms of all the different human body systems. I mean, what's interesting is without food, we could survive weeks. Without water, no, we wouldn't survive after just a few days. Hey, drink when you're thirsty, but don't wait too long. Active kids, athletes, older adults need to be especially mindful and pay attention in terms of how much water you have. Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, let's kind of lift the veil in terms of a lot of these nutrients. And we've heard the words before, but what really is it that they do for us? And where do we get them? Well, carbohydrates specifically are very misunderstood. You got to think of carbs as gasoline for our body's engine. Scientifically, they're molecules that are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But practically, they're our body's quickest source of energy. Now, there's two main types of carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates like sugar. You want to get some energy fast, have a chocolate bar. But in nature, they're found in fruit, they're found in milk, and obviously, like I mentioned, candy. But the other carbohydrates are not simple like sugar. They're complex carbohydrates. And those you've got to think of whole grains. Yes, they provide energy, but they're slow and they're steady. That's why you want some energy. You just release it by having some oats, some brown rice, some whole wheat bread, and yes, some vegetables. The key point here is that not all carbohydrates are equal. The whole unprocessed carbs are like logs in a fire. They last a long time. The sugary carbs, they're like paper. They quick burst and they're gone right in the fireplace. Great metaphor. So kids especially need carbohydrates. Why? Because they're obviously growing, they're learning, they're moving all the time, need a lot of energy. And let's talk about this idea and this word. From the earliest age, you've got to know about processing, right? So when we say processed carbohydrates, we're talking about carbohydrates that have been changed from their natural state. And when that happens, you remove parts of the food that are actually good for you. Here's the simplest way to think about this. Unprocessed carbs, and again, when we talk about food throughout this episode and throughout your life, you've got to look at foods that are natural, that come out of the ground, right? That are not processed by human beings. So the whole, what we call whole carbohydrates, they're their original form, the way nature made them. So we're talking about whole grains, which are, what are grains? They're rice, they're oats, they're whole wheat, right? They come out of the ground. You get talking about fruits, you're talking about vegetables, you're talking about beans. They still have fiber, vitamins, and their minerals intact. Basically, the opposite, processed carbohydrates, they've been refined, changed, stripped down. The common examples, which you should stay away from, again, generally speaking, of course, it's not going to hurt if you have them now and then, but if you're looking for the ideal diet, adults and my younger members of the audience especially, stay away from processed carbohydrates, which are white bread, white rice, any cereals that have tons of sugar, cookies, cakes, pastries, soda and candy. Soda especially, it tastes so good. I'm not going to sit here and lecture. I get it. But they have no nutritional value at all. That means they have no nutrients to speak of, right? So when you're talking about these processed carbohydrates, what's been removed? Well, fiber. That helps slow down your digestion, which helps you. It obviously, like I said, it removes nutrients, which are vitamins and minerals that are essential and needed. And when we say processed, it's altered and it's changed. So when you take out what's good, what's often added, sugar, salt, and what they call artificial ingredients that are made in a laboratory, in a factory. Hey, what happens in our body with these processed carbohydrates? They break down very quickly into sugar. So instead of a steady stream of energy, you get a quick spike, you feel energized, but then, yes, after that, it's called a crash. And yes, we've all experienced this. You feel tired and hungry again. That's why you'll hear kids getting quote unquote sugar highs, and adults, they'll feel sluggish after eating a lot of these processed foods. On to number three, which is proteins. We've covered carbohydrates, we've covered water. The proteins are our construction workers. They're made of something called amino acids, which are tiny building blocks. Our body uses these amino acids to build muscles, repair tissues, make enzymes, and hormones. Good protein sources in our food: meat, fish, eggs, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, and any kind of dairy. Hey, if our body is basically this one big Lego structure, you got to think about proteins being the bricks. Children need protein for growth. Teenagers need it for their growth spurts. And adults, we need it to not only just help us grow, but maintain our body. And certainly older adults need it so we're not really losing a lot of muscles. All right, so let's just do a quick deep dive into protein. Listen, this goes back to the 1800s. Scientists were starting to take food apart, and it all was about chemistry. The huge advances across the board were looking at everything from a microscopic level, and there was this Dutch chemist, Gerardus Johannes Mulder, and he was studying foods like meat, eggs, and milk, and he noticed that all these different foods, the three of them, contained a similar substance. That was new. People just, like I said earlier in the episode, they just thought food was food. But diving deep down into the differences, Mulder believed that what was part of these foods was really fundamental to life. And in the 1830s, he identified it. And yes, then there came along this Swedish chemist, and I tell you what, there's so many scientists that are so overlooked, but you've got to understand this gentleman. His name was Jöns Jacob Berzelius. He was a giant of early chemistry, and he gave this substance its name. It came from the Greek word proteus, which means of first importance. Today we know it as protein, and yes, that name stuck for good reason. So when you think of proteins, the easiest way to understand it is just know if our body is a house, like I said before, the metaphor with the building blocks, the protein is the building material. Muscles, protein, skin, hair, and even parts of our blood and immune system all are made up of protein. Every day, our body is breaking down and rebuilding itself again, and it's but proteins that make it possible. But here's where the amino acids come in. Scientists kept digging and digging and discovered something even more fascinating than just this substance. Proteins aren't just one solid thing. They're made of smaller pieces. Those smaller pieces are what we call the amino acids. You got to think of it like protein is the necklace and the amino acids are the beads on the necklace. There's 20 different amino acids, and our body mixes and matches them in different ways to build everything that our body needs. Some amino acids our bodies can make on its own. Others, called essential amino acids, you must get from our food. That's why protein in our diet matters so much. So why should we care? Why should we know about these amino acids? Not because we need to just memorize another word that sounds fancy, because you need to know about them because of what they do for us. If you're not getting enough amino acids, your body can't repair itself well. Your muscles will weaken over time, your healing, it will slow down, and your energy and just your strength can be sapped. For kids, it's all about growing and becoming strong, right? Adults, it's all about maintaining ourselves. It's all about bringing our old car for a good tune-up. And especially for older adults, and I guess I'm getting into this category, it's really more than anything else protecting against our muscles breaking down. Okay, the next nutrient after water, carbohydrates, and protein, it's our fats. Yes, they get a bad rap, especially in the 90s. We need fats. It's definitely the most misunderstood. And it's all about, it's our storage system. That's how you have to think about them. They're actually our body's long-term energy storage and insulation system. You got to think of fats as batteries. They store energy. Coats, the jackets we wear, they provide insulation and protective padding. What do we use them for? Well, to protect our organs. And there are different types of fats. There's healthy fats, which we call unsaturated fats. We get them from olive oils, from avocados, from nuts, to fish. And then there's the less healthy fats we call saturated fats. We get them from butter and fatty meats. And then there's something that we also call trans fats, and those are the ones we ideally want to avoid. The bottom line is our body needs fats, but it needs the right kinds of fat. Hey, listen, if we're going without food for a long period of time, it's the fats that are built up in our body that provide us that energy without getting it from, let's say, food over a period of time. Now, let's do a quick deep dive because even for adults, it can be kind of confusing. We've heard these terms, but especially for my younger members of the audience, listen, it's not that complicated. The idea is actually pretty simple. Once you strip away all these fancy words, saturated, unsaturated, again, going back to this time period I referenced before with proteins, the early 1900s, chemists began studying the structure of fats at the molecular level. And this gentleman by the name of Wilhelm Norman discovered that fats are made of long chains of carbon atoms with hydrogen attached. Here's the key thing. A saturated fat is quote unquote saturated with hydrogen, meaning it's holding as much hydrogen as it possibly can. An unsaturated fat is not full. It has room for more hydrogen. That tiny difference changes everything. The saturated fats, you got to think of like a parking lot where every space is filled. Because they're packed tightly, they're usually solid at room temperature, like butter. They stack together easily in our body. Again, they're common places we get them are cheese, fatty meats, butter. And for a long time, scientists noticed that diets high in this saturated fat were linked to heart disease. In the 50s, this researcher, one of them, Ansel Keys, helped popularize the idea that saturated fat actually raised cholesterol and increased problems with our hearts. Now, the unsaturated fats are the more flexible ones. Going back to that metaphor of the parking lot, you got to imagine now you got empty spaces in this parking lot, and the spaces, you have bends in the lines. That's unsaturated fat. Because they're not packed tightly together, they're usually liquid at room temperature, and they move more freely in our bloodstream, like olive oil. These types include monounsaturated fats, olive oil, avocados, polyunsaturated fats, fish, nuts. These fats have been shown to support healthy hearts when they replace the saturated fats. And now, finally, the big bad guy, the artificial fats, we call them trans fats. They're where things get really interesting. In the early 1900s, scientists figured out how to artificially, when I say artificial, that means basically doing it not naturally. They figured out how to artificially add hydrogen to liquid oils to make them solid. It was a process called hydrogenation. This made foods last longer on shelves. You talk about a turning point. But it also created this new type of fat that we today call trans fats. Now, you got to think of them as being bent, twisted molecules that don't behave naturally. They show up in our packaged snacks. You look at the middle of our grocery stores, things that are in boxes as opposed to naturally at the perimeter of stores. When you walk into stores, you see the fruits and vegetables that come naturally out of the ground. Well, if you've got trans fats, they're showing up, like I said, in these snacks, junk food, fried foods, and even some margarine as well. In the late 20th century, researchers discovered that trans fats raise the bad cholesterol, they lower the good cholesterol, and yes, they increase the problems with our hearts. They're today largely being phased out. So again, to back up, in the 80s and 90s, the message became oversimplified. Fat is bad, eat less fat. But the food companies responded by making low-fat products. But here's the twist. When you remove fat, food tastes bland. So what did they do? They added sugar and processed carbohydrates. What's happening as a result? People are eating more sugar, obesity rates are climbing, and fat took the blame. So where are we today? Science is much more balanced. Not all fats are bad. Some fats are actually essential for our body, as I mentioned up front. But here's the current understanding. And here at the this episode, released here in 2026 in the springtime, they favor unsaturated fats, the olive oils, the nuts, the fish. You should limit the saturated fats, but don't completely eliminate them. Don't fear them. And you want to avoid these trans fats as much as possible. Simple takeaway, again, deep dive on fats. Saturated, packed tight. Unsaturated, more flexible. And trans, artificial, and not good for us. Okay, we've covered water, carbohydrates, protein, fats. How about some vitamins? Yeah, we all take that multivitamin, but we get vitamins naturally from our foods. They're like the tiny managers. They're fascinating. They don't give us energy directly, but without them, our body can't use energy at all. You got to think of vitamins as, like I said, managers that are helping our body's factory. Vitamin C, we all know that. It helps healing. You're feeling sick, as my mom always told me, just take extra vitamin C. Vitamin D in our previous episode on our skin, well, it helps our bones absorb calcium. Vitamin A, it supports division. There's so many vitamins. And as a matter of fact, I'll talk about a future episode, but these vitamins, they were discovered when scientists noticed diseases were caused by missing them. I mentioned scurvy, the lack of vitamin C. Rickets was another one. That was a lack of vitamin D. You only need small amounts of vitamins, but they're absolutely essential. And of course, where do you get them? Right from the get-go, just have fruits and vegetables. You start off with them as a staple of your diet, you're going to be fine. But yes, whole foods are the best sources. And finally, water, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals. And yeah, they're like our engineers. What? I thought rocks were minerals. Minerals make up rocks. Yeah, we have rocks in our body. They come from the earth. Plants absorb them from the soil. Animals eat plants, and we eat plants and animals. So we naturally have minerals in our body. Yeah, we have iron in our body. So They are literally and figuratively like the steel beams and the wiring in our body. Calcium helps strengthen our bones. Iron, I mentioned, carries oxygen in our blood. Potassium helps muscles and nerves work. Without minerals, our bodies would lose its structure and, yes, our communication system. Are we healthier today? Hey, listen, we're living longer because we've eradicated disease. So much of what we know today, we are living longer because we understand the enemies of our body and germs. But compared to 100 and 300 years ago, here's where we need to think of what we're doing here with understanding how we're taking care of our bodies. We're living longer. We understand nutrition better. We have access to better food. But the challenges we face are with our foods and whether or not, right, they're natural, that people in the past didn't necessarily have to worry about. Are our foods processed? Do we have too much sugar, too much salt? And are we eating too much? In the past, people suffered from not having enough, but today, I would argue people are really suffering from not balancing our foods and what we're putting into our body being appropriate. So it's not about are we eating enough, it's are we eating the right things. And finally, to wrap up our podcast, there's something called the food pyramid. It's the guide to balancing what we should be eating. It came out in 1992, the United States Department of Agriculture, and they introduced this food pyramid. It showed, bottom line, eat more grains, fruits, and vegetables, moderate the protein and dairy that you intake, and limit fats and sweets. Today, it's evolved into, quote, my plate, unquote. Again, this episode being released in 2026. And how about this to wrap up? Ideal meals for kids: breakfast, oatmeal, fruit, milk, lunch, a sandwich, vegetables, yogurt, dinner, chicken, rice, broccoli. Teenagers, get more protein and calories so you can grow. Get those balanced meals with healthy snacks. And adults, focus on variety, moderation with everything. We all love the pizza on Friday night. We all love the ice cream on a Saturday and during the summertime. Of course, everything with moderation. And just watch those processed foods. And for people like me, oh boy, can't change what's been in the past, but certainly more protein to maintain our muscles, more calcium, more vitamin D for our bones, and water, water, water. At the end of the day, anytime I have any of my students that's not feeling well, the nurse clued me in early on in my teaching career. Kevin, just tell them to drink more water. So much of our ills and our problems can be explained with not being hydrated enough. Every bite we take, we deliver to our body carbohydrates to fuel it, proteins to build it, fats to protect it, vitamins and minerals to guide it, and water just to keep us alive. Thousands of years, humans guessed at what we needed to eat. Today we know. But yet, our challenge remains the same. Will we give our bodies what we truly need? Friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think of any episodes, something that you can take with you, bring with you for the rest of your life. So important what we put into our body, knowing our nutrients that makes our body work. Reach out to me at kevmok21@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at OK Let's Learn. We are on YouTube, OK Let's Learn. Always love the 5-star reviews. Always love the reviews on Apple Podcasts. And definitely, if you're enjoying the podcast, we come out every couple days. Hit the plus button in the right-hand corner. That will subscribe you to the podcast. You'll get new episodes each and every time we release an episode. So again, thank you. Until next time, have fun and keep learning.